Bonjour everyone and welcome back to my channel Waves of Your Soul. Today's video is going to be dedicated to showcasing my favorite underrated tarot decks. So those are tarot decks that I kind of consider underdogs in the tarot tube world because I don't see that many people talk about it. Now I think some of those decks might have had their time of glory. There's so many decks coming out every single month that older decks sometimes tend to be put on the back burner, so we don't mention them so much. And also some of those decks are kind of more recent, but I feel like they haven't really been mentioned a lot on the videos I watched anyway. And also not just in terms of videos for TarotTube where people share, their favorite decks, but I also watch a lot of tarot readings on YouTube, which is something I do myself. There are some decks that I'm gonna show here that I never see used by, pick a card readings or, those type of videos. I wanted to give their moment of glory to what I consider underrated decks, underdog decks, and that I feel like maybe you would enjoy seeing. I definitely enjoy using them. And so I thought it would be fun. I didn't really pick any indie deck for today's video because I feel like today anyway I wanted to showcase kind of like the hidden gems that might be hiding in your local bookstore, on Amazon or Book Depository, whereas indie decks, I feel like generally speaking they are hidden gem anyway, because some of indie decks, they're more low-key, we don't see them that often, they're more unusual, they're less easy to get a hold of, so it's more usual for an indie deck to be underrated or to be a hidden gem, to be kind of like an underdog kind of vibe. Whereas for mass market, there seems to be definitely decks that are very well known, very used, for good reasons. Obviously those decks are great. Top of my head, for example, the Modern Witch, the Light Seers, Mermaid Tarot, the Fountain Tarot. Those are all kind of mass market decks that I see quite often. And so today's video is like the reverse coin of that, kind of mass market decks that I don't see enough in my opinion, and so I wanted to show them to you. I would actually love to know what are your underrated tarot decks in your collection, so feel free to leave me a comment below letting me know what deck you really enjoy that you have, that you'd feel like you don't see enough of being talked about and shared. It doesn't just have to be on TarotTube, it can also be on Instagram, etc. Whatever platform you use to look at decks, etc. Let me know in the comments down below if there's any tarot deck that you love, that you feel like you don't see enough. So if it is your first time here, I want to say a huge welcome. My name is Marine, I'm a French tarot reader and a lover of everything tarot, oracle and self-empowerment related. I post regular pick a card readings, intuitive guidance on lots of cool subjects. I also post a lot of videos around tarot and oracle decks. So if you'd like to see any more of those things on your timeline, you can join the tide and subscribe because I upload every single week. So as I mentioned in the introduction, today's video is only going to showcase mass market decks. I have 10 of them. If you do want to see my underrated indie decks, like the indie decks I feel are not really getting much attention and should, then also let me know in the comments. Of course, I would be very happy to do that. Okay, so let's get started with my, in my opinion, underrated mass market deck. And again, this is something I say in all of my videos, but of course you're allowed to disagree. These are just my opinions. Everyone will probably have different opinion, so if you don't agree with me, that is totally okay. And also, if you watched any of my previous video, I have very eclectic taste. I like historical inspired decks, I like fantasy decks, I like modern decks, I kind of like everything. I'm very greedy like that. So hopefully there is something here that will please every single one of you, depending on what kind of taste you have, or if you have a very eclectic taste like mine. So let's get started. The first underrated tarot deck I wanted to mention is actually the Gaian Tarot. So I keep mine in a little pouch because it came in one of those boxes that is very flimsy, and so I decided to just keep that in a little pouch. Here are the backs, and I've actually cut mine off because this particular edition now comes with huge blue borders that were atrocious, so I had to cut them away, even though I'm clearly not the best modder out there. I mean, you can see it's not even an even cut. I just went out there with my scissors like a proper savage, and you know what? I'm happy with the results. It's good enough for me, which is the main thing. That's what's important, right? I feel like with deck mod, if any of you out there are stressed about trying deck modification, remember you're doing it for yourself. So even if it's not perfect, who cares? Nobody's gonna come down and shout at you for, you know, uneven cuts or leaving a bit of the border off or staining the card if you're trying to edge. It's fine. From experience, I can tell you it's okay. The Gaian Tarot is, in my opinion, a very underrated tarot deck because I don't see it mentioned that often. I feel like this deck is a little bit older, like it must be 5 or 6 years old, maybe even more actually. Maybe 10? I'm not sure, to be honest. I'll have to look it up. But you know, in tarot years, they're like dog years, so it's probably like 3 decades if we convert that, because of the pure amount of decks that come out every single month. However, this deck is a beautiful deck. It is so healing. As you can see, it is nature inspired, but it has a lot of human. And the premise of this deck, being called the Gaian Tarot, is that it is very rooted in nature, but also very rooted in day-to-day life. Human represented, I believe, were real human that were part of Joanna Colbert's life. Some of the cards are people she knew, so they are real people. And as you can see, everyone looks like someone you could see in your day-to-day life, which I really enjoy. This deck has beautiful diversity in terms of age, in terms of ethnicity, so I appreciate the fact that it kind of showcases the real world that we live in, but everything is through the lens of Mother Nature. Then beautiful scenery, beautiful animal companion on every single card. Even the court card, there will always be an animal or several animals, and I find that very interesting because it always links, you know, the nature kind of element. Some of the cards will also have plant ally, so for example the Hierophant has many plants here, as you can see. We have the garlic here and other plants that I'm not a pro at plants so I'm not gonna try and tell you what it is because I'll probably say a lot of crap, but as you can see there's also animals there. What I appreciate is that their animals and the plants are not the main focus of the deck, but they are always present. The humans and the plants and the animals coexist in a way that is very harmonious and that is hopeful. I absolutely love this Two of Earth. This is one of my favorite cards. I find it gorgeous. So this deck is just absolutely stunning. A couple of the major arcana cards have been renamed. So for example, the Devil is now Bindweed. I think maybe the Death card has been renamed. The Empress is now the Gardener. So as you can see, it's done in a way that it still makes sense, though it definitely goes with the theme of Mother Gaia, Mother Nature. This Empress is beautiful, and as you can see again, we have a little animal here, one here, we have some plants. The guidebook is amazing. Honestly, the guidebook is one of the best guidebooks that I have ever read, especially coming from a mass market deck. I don't want to go too much into the guidebook in this video because I'm going to make a dedicated video all about my favorite tarot deck guidebooks, so I'll talk more at length about the guidebook. Just know that if you love the artwork in this, the guidebook makes it even better. Suits have been renamed by element, which makes a lot of sense because we're all about nature, right? So cups are water, wands are fire, swords are air, and pentacles are earth. Overall, this deck is absolutely gorgeous. It is full of hope, it's full of beautiful landscape, it's full of healing Mother Nature vibe. It is, you know, depicts the world as we see it, with older people, younger people, people from all walks of life. I just think this deck is beautiful. I feel like for me this deck is also very centered around community, around what we can do as a human being to help, you know, the collective at large. And I don't see this deck being talked about a lot. I know that it was very popular at some point. I feel like now, because it's a little bit older, it doesn't get its moment, which is why I really wanted to showcase it. I think if you're a beginner, you could absolutely use this deck. It's beautiful. I forgot to say all of the aces are an animal, so I find that very interesting as well. And if you're a lover of nature or a lover of animals or plants or anything like that, or you're in the market for a deck that has a lot of healing vibes, that feels very grounded, then this is definitely going to be the deck for you. I know that Joanna Powell Colbert also created a tarot deck called the Herbcrafted Tarot. I don't have that deck yet, but I have ordered it. Because I enjoy this one so much, so I'll let you know how I get on with this one. But this is a Gaian Tarot, and it's my first pick for my underrated mass market tarot decks. Okay, let's move on. My choice number 2 out of 10, and those are in no particular order by the way, is the Ancestral Past Tarot by Julie Kuchia Watts. And this is a US game, and it comes in one of those tuck box, and inside is a little guidebook, like little white guidebook, that is not very substantial but does give you some important information. So this deck, again, you know, I've included it in today's video. It is underrated. Unfortunately, I don't see it being used a lot. I don't see it being shown a lot. I've definitely had comments on my channel before when I've shown this deck from people saying, oh, thank you so much for showing it because I love it and I don't see it shown a lot. So this deck I know is well loved, but it just doesn't seem to be shown that much. Again, maybe because it's an older one. So this is the back. I love this beautiful pearl. Looks like a pearl and a moon. The copyright here is 2019, but I feel like this deck has been around since the 90s. It's just been reprinted probably a couple of times. So the premise of this deck is that it's called the Ancestral Past because it is rooted in history, kind of mythology and storytelling from different civilizations, from different mythology. So the cups are inspired by King Arthur, you know, Avalon kind of vibe with like Morgan Le Fay and things like that. Sacred circles, which are pentacles, are inspired by indigenous mythology. We also have Egyptian mythology depicted as wands. And finally, the last suit is swords, and that is inspired by Japanese mythology. The major arcana cards are all kind of inspired by different mythological events, but I don't believe they follow a particular mythology, more just like general, you know, ancestral vibe. This deck is absolutely beautiful. Every single card was hand painted by Julia, and it's just absolutely stunning. Look at this hermit. It feels like very Merlin. I feel like that is the first kind of appeal for this deck, is the beauty of it, the fact that every single card feels like a piece of art. One thing that is a shame is that the guidebook this time around with this particular edition, which is the latest one you can get on, you know, Book Depository or whatever, is a little white book that is very small. It gives you important information though, because it tells you for each of the card who is the god, goddess or figures that inspired the card, but it doesn't tell you a lot about that. For example, this particular card I believe is Amaterasu, who is the goddess of the sun in Japanese mythology. But if you want to know a little bit more about Amaterasu, you're gonna have to do some Google research. I know that this particular deck used to come with a proper book, big chunky guidebook in the previous like 90s edition. I don't unfortunately have that edition, and that edition is now out of print. I believe potentially maybe if you go on Julie Kuchia Watts' website, maybe she sells the guidebook independently. I will have to see. She also creates another few different indie decks. One of them I do have, which is an Egyptian inspired deck, and it's beautiful. It's the same kind of art style but only about Egyptian mythology. She has a few, another one called the Mat Tarot, which is also very popular, and for those on her website she sells individual kind of guidebooks, separate guidebooks. I'll have a look on her website to see if she sells a separate guidebook for this deck. But in terms of the deck you get from, you know, as a mass market version, just know that the guidebook is limited. However, you could definitely read this deck because it does follow the RWS system, so you can easily navigate it. So this deck I feel is very underrated because not that many people show this deck. Not that many people seem to read with this deck either in the pick a card readings, etc. that I've seen. However, I do think that this is a fantastic one. It's called the Ancestral Past Tarot, so of course this would be a great one for ancestor communication or trying to maybe do past life reading, anything like that, or even just like readings when you're trying to tap into the ancestors' egregore, like ancestor energy. anything like that, I feel like this would be a fantastic deck. I think also this could be a great deck if you're a writer and you're trying to do creative writing, you're trying to get inspiration, you're trying to construct a story of some kind. This could be great for that. And generally speaking, the characters are so emotive. Like, look at this. I believe this is Guinevere in the Arthurian legends, and look at her emotion. She doesn't look like your regular Queen of Cups, and I appreciate that. So this deck is great. I think it's very underrated, and I would totally recommend you checking it out if you enjoy this kind of vibe. I will say, maybe you haven't noticed because I have quite large hands, but this deck is huge. So if I use just a regular tarot card, this is like regular size, and I compare, as you can see, this deck is quite a lot bigger. I want to make that clear because I know that for some people who have smaller hands, needing to be aware of. But overall, I feel like this is totally a hidden gem. Okay, next up we have on a totally different genre, because like I've said, I have very eclectic taste. Another underrated deck, I think, in my opinion, that doesn't get shown a lot, that's kind of like a hidden gem, is a Neo Tarot. I have the French version, but I know that you can get the exact same deck in English, and I believe the setup is the same. I will say this is the worst tarot box I have ever seen in my life, and I will tell you why. When you buy it, you think, oh, this is gonna be cute, right? This is gonna be nice. And then when you open it, here you have a little tuck box, which is where the deck comes in, so that's cute. And here, normally, is where they have glued the book down. I literally had to tear this guidebook out, which is why, I don't know if you can see, but my guidebook is like kind of battered. But here I've had to cover this with white paper because everything underneath is like ripped paper, because they literally glue this down. So if you want to use the guidebook, you have to like carry this box with you around like this. Like, who does that? Who has got time for that? Imagine putting that huge box in your bag just so you can read this particular guidebook. And it's such a shame because the guidebook is fantastic. It really does a good job. As you can see, there's a full page for each of the cards. There's an upward meaning, a reverse meaning. There's even a for each of the cards something that is focused around healing, self-care, self-empowerment, because that is the whole vibe of the deck. It's all about personal development, personal healing, etc. There's an affirmation or a mantra for each of the card and keywords, and it also comes with a lot of great spreads. This is a great guidebook, especially if you're a beginner. I really recommend this particular deck. If you want to learn, I think it's great. If you're put off by the RWS kind of imagery, this still follows RWS but with a modern twist. But the box is like, what is that? Imagine that was still stuck. If I didn't literally rip this off, I would still be carrying this everywhere, and ain't nobody got time for that. Like, I don't know who thought about this particular design, but it is so shit. I've had to dig through my bottom drawer of like shameful boxes to find this, because I put it so far away because it really pissed me off. And you know, normally I'm not a snob about box. I don't even care about shitty tuck box, but this one, oh my god, it pushed my buttons. Thankfully you can keep it in this little tuck box, which I end up doing anyway. So here are the backs, and I have edged mine in blue. The Neo Tarot is a modern deck. It is a more, I would say the artwork is more on the, I don't want to say minimalist, because I don't feel like it's, you know, pared down to the point where it's just line work, but it definitely is kind of like the RWS, but with less symbolism, and just pares down the tarot card for the essence of it. And I think this is a great deck. This is a great deck because, first off, even though it feels like modern, it still very much follows RWS, and it gives you all the information that you need to still be able to use any RWS deck, book or anything like that. So if you're a beginner, totally recommend this one. This is also a great for me deck, and I feel like it's underrated because it does have some diversity, lovely body diversity with some fuller figures, which I'm so happy to see. And finally, why I love this deck is that I find this deck very gender neutral. A lot of the characters don't necessarily look feminine or masculine or female or male. You know, they are more blurred. a lot of the characters are dressed and you know, depicted in a way where it feels very gender neutral. So I feel like this would be a great deck regardless of how you identify, and I feel like this deck is great for potentially reading for anyone, even for people who might be a little bit intimidated by tarot. This is a great one in my opinion because it doesn't look or feel occult or scary. It just looks like the essence of the cards have been retained, but with a modern twist. I love the bright colors. I love the oranges mixed with the pink and the purple. That kind of color, you know, those color combinations are so cool. The fact that there's a lot of different skin tones on those beings, I appreciate just everything. The whole vibe about this deck I think is fantastic. And for me, this is such an underrated deck. I never see anyone talk about it. I've watched a lot of, you know, I watch a lot of videos and I don't really see anyone read with it or mention it. A lot of modern decks that people tend to gravitate towards for good reasons. I have those decks seem to be the Light Seers Tarot, the Modern Witch Tarot, the Muse Tarot. Those are all very great decks and I have them, I love them, but I feel like the Neo Tarot is kind of an underdog and I think it's a great one. It feels very like a celebration of everyone regardless because of the diversity it shows, because of that kind of like gender neutrality vibe I was talking about. I would be very comfortable reading with this deck for anyone, whether it's for people I know or don't know, because I feel like this deck wouldn't trigger anyone and I feel like people would recognize themselves in this particular deck. So this for me is a great one for either reading for others or of course for myself. Okay, let's move on to the next one, and the next one is a deck that I have shown a few times on my channel. I'm sure if you watched some of my previous videos this is not going to be a surprise. This is the Omegaland Tarot deck and card game, because yes, you can use this deck not just to read tarot but also to play some kind of board game or something with a card, which to be fair I've never really looked into. I just love this deck for tarot purposes. This is again a mass market deck and I don't see that many people talk about this deck. So the purpose of this deck is that it kind of depicts everything through a post-apocalyptic world. Something has happened and other humans are trying to survive and trying to make their way through the world, and in a way where it really hits us, showcasing how as a society we might adapt after a tragedy. Which, let's be real, in the sense of what has happened in the last year or so, feels very interesting to go and dig into a little bit of that with this deck, even though this was created way before. I don't know when this was created, but it's been around for a few years for sure. So these are the backs and they look like someone who's been boarding themselves up, which is so appropriate for a post-apocalyptic feel. This deck still follows RWS, you know, the names of the suits are the same, major arcana is the same, but everything is depicted in the sense of post-apocalyptic world. So instead of wands we'll have guns, instead of swords we'll have crossbows, instead of cusps we'll have flasks, and instead of coins we'll have canned food, which makes a lot of sense if you're trying to survive. This deck for me does a great job at depicting what makes us human. The good, the bad, and mostly the ugly. You know, some of the cards will show how when humans are faced with a disaster they might come together and help each other, but some of the cards will show how some people might become selfish or even violent. This game will showcase violence, will showcase guns, will showcase blood, will showcase, you know, it's not for the faint-hearted. Like this is a typical example. The cartoonish style does take away, like it's not too gory, but I mean, let's be real, this guy has a arrow up in his head, so it's still pretty, you know, it hits, right? It's pretty impactful. So this is not the kind of deck that's gonna be pleasing to everyone. I completely understand that. And one thing I really don't like about the deck is the fact that it only showcases white people. So that is for me, you know, not ideal. I would have absolutely loved to see more diversity there. However, I still think this is an underrated deck and a very interesting deck because there is nothing, I have never seen anything out there on the market that showcases humans' behavior towards challenges that well. This will show how humans fight with each other, how they help each other, how they defend themselves, how they have hope, how they're being intelligent or dumb or naive or hopeful or brave or stupid or mean, absolutely perfectly. And I think this is a really great shadow work deck of the nature of the deck, showcasing absolutely every single array of the human emotion, and also showcasing how humans face adversity. Like I said, this deck is not necessarily for the faint-hearted, but it definitely for me always hits the mark. And look at this Justice card. It's like tit for tat, I think that's the saying. It's like, I got you, you got me, I got you again, who's gonna die first? I'm not sure. There is so much to unpack here. Someone dig a grave, and I guess this guy was about to kill this person, but this person is managing to defend themselves. But is he gonna kill her before she kills him? Who's gonna survive? Are they both gonna die? Who digs a grave? Is this a sense of justice? Is there even justice? Is it just karma? Is it just irony? Is the point that at the end of the day there is no justice and it's just, human-made justice is broken? There is so much to unpack, and each card is just like that. So for me, this is absolutely a hidden gem. If you want to do some work around your behaviors, your triggers, especially being faced with adversity, with challenges or anything like that, and even if you want to do some readings, around for the collective, but around what we've been going through and what we've gone through last year, I think this is very appropriate, and it definitely packs a punch. And for a deck that could feel gimmicky, especially the way that it's marketed, it says tarot deck and card game. It could look quite comic-y, comic book kind of vibe, a bit gimmicky, but it packs a punch, this one. And absolutely for me, it's an underrated deck that I really recommend if you want to go a bit deeper. Okay, let's move on to a deck that I don't think I've shown on my channel before, even though I've had it for a few years. This is a Golden Tarot by Cat Black. This is miles off from what I've shown you, again, very different, but this is a medieval kind of inspired tarot deck. Every single artwork is gonna be reusing pre-existing medieval art, but that has been collaged and manipulated by Cat Black. So here are the backs, very beautiful, and because it's called the Golden Tarot, it came with really nice golden edging. This is another one that I don't see many people talk about, even though I feel like it's really beautiful and really interesting. So like I said, this definitely reuses pre-existing medieval artwork, but Cat Black has collaged, manipulated, cut and pasted things to make each card kind of follow the tarot system. It definitely follows the RWS in a sense, so if you're familiar with that system, you won't be lost. Wands are still wands, cups are still cups, swords are swords, and pentacles are, still coins. None of it has been renamed. I don't believe the major arcana has been renamed either. But as you can see, this deck has not just a medieval feel, a bit of a religious feel. Because of the nature of it being medieval inspired, there might be some imagery that some people would consider very Christian, even though I'm not Christian. I was not raised Christian. I don't really see that in the deck, but I know that some people who have been raised Christian or part of Christianity or still part of Christianity, etc., some of them I know still kind of see that vibe in this deck. So I guess it's up to you whether that makes for you the deck more interested or if it deters you from the deck. For me, I more take it at face value of medieval kind of artwork, and so in that sense I find it very interesting because I don't really have anything like this deck in my collection. I have decks that are using already historical artwork, but not in that medieval sense of the Dark Ages, and I feel like this deck really hits that kind of Dark Ages kind of vibe where people are struggling, people are not having a good time, people are really, there's some celebration obviously in some of the cards like Four of Wands, etc., but there's some also really tough cards. This Four of Cups is hysterical. I think it's so funny. The face is like, I am sick and tired of this shit. I have to take care of all of these animals. There's like, you know, this angel over there is like, look at me, and but this one is like, I am done. Like, I'm sick of this shepherd life. I want more for myself. I love this card. I think this is, I don't know why, but this deck, I should hate it in terms of the imagery really doesn't necessarily normally calls to me. This is not necessarily my vibe. I mean, I did say I have eclectic taste, but normally this kind of vibe is not necessarily my taste. But for some reason, this particular deck really hits a spot I need, and the readings I have done with this deck have always been so spot on. I've actually been using it most of the months of September, and it has been so empowering, so interesting. So maybe it's because I come from, obviously, you know, I'm French, so this is the kind of imagery that I've seen a lot at school, in museums. I would totally understand if you don't come from European heritage, this would not be an appealing deck necessarily, and I can totally appreciate that. But personally, it's one that I have really enjoyed using. I think the collage is done really well. Even though it follows RWS, it gives you something else, something more. Look at this Ace of Coins. It's not just someone handing a coin. We have this whole kind of like angel here. We have a, I don't know, a peacock, is that what you call them? We have this whole new like garden waiting for you to come through, like a threshold to cross. You have this flower here, you have a lion here. There is so much intuitively that you could get from each of the images, and for me this is what I've really enjoyed using this deck, is that I have enjoyed not just the readings I get, but also the intuitive pulls I get. I think if you resonate with this particular imagery, then you could get some great reading out of it, and it is the Golden Tarot by Cat Black. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We are again doing a completely different theme. This deck is called Tarot Cosmique in French, but in English it is called the Cosmic Tarot. And this is a deck from the 70s, I believe. Either 70s or 80s, so it's been around for a few decades. So it's part for me it's part of those classic decks, such as the Aquarian, the Handsome Robert, the Robin Hood. Out of all the more classic, you know, decks that have been around for a few decades, this particular deck, the Cosmic Tarot, seems to be not that talked about. And I think it's because it's probably the quirkiest. This deck is bonkers. It is batshit crazy. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm gonna tell you like it is. This deck is so strange. First of all, everything looks to be either on a green, yellow, purple or blue filter that makes everyone look, you know, kind of like alienish colors. There is a lot of movement in this deck. Like, it feels like it's full of dancers, which I really appreciate. With, for example, look at this one, this Four of Wands, feels like, you know, a lot of movement, etc. There are a lot of esoteric symbolism in this deck. There is, you know, some chakra symbolism, Egyptian symbolism. It's definitely interesting, but look at this, for example, Wheel of Fortune. You know, there's a lot there to unpack. This deck also apparently depicts famous actors and actresses, so there is a lot. Look at this Eight of Wands, my favorite card of the deck. This Eight of Wands is absolutely amazing. It's iconic. How can you not love this Eight of Wands? Like, if this doesn't scream movement, I don't know what does. It's fucking brilliant. So this deck has it all. It has occult occult kind of symbolism. It has crazy cosmic vibes. It has apparently famous actors and actresses from older movies, which I'm not super familiar with. It just has a lot. I love it so much. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And this is so underrated. I never see this deck used online. We have the title card here. I rarely see it shown on Instagram, and I think it's so good. It's ridiculous in the best way possible. It doesn't take itself too seriously. This deck, paired with the Morgan's Tarot, which is not a tarot, it's actually an oracle from the 70s as well, is a power couple. Look at this Ten of Swords. What is going on there? I don't even know, but I mean, you have my attention. So quirky, so different. One thing that most people don't know about this deck is that in this particular edition from US Game, it comes with a little guidebook, you know, one of those little white guidebook. But you can actually get a fuller guidebook on Kindle for about €2. I think I paid something really cheap, like €2 or €3. You'll get a proper big guidebook, and this guidebook is amazing. Again, I'll talk about it more in my favorite guidebooks the videos that I plan to do, but for €2 or €3 you can get it on your Kindle, and it's fantastic. And for a deck that came out in the 70s, some of the messages that came in the guidebook are really ahead of their time, talking about, you know, social justice and points about ecology and things like that, taking care for the planet and pollution and things that are just very still accurate to this day. So this is definitely for me an underrated deck and still a hidden gem, and I love it, and it is Tarot Cosmic or Cosmic Tarot. Okay, let's move on. I haven't really used this deck, to be honest, yet. I've only edged it, and this is a New Era Elements Tarot by Eleanor F. Piper, PhD. And so this is again, I think it's US Game. Yes, it's US Games. I haven't, like I said, used this deck yet because it's Thoth based. So I am wanting to learn the Thoth, and so I decided to get this deck as my modern Thoth or Thoth or however the fuck you say it. And then I also have a more traditional Thoth deck. So unlike all the other decks I've shown you today, this is not RWS inspired. This deck I feel like is underrated. I see this deck very rarely. I believe this is, yes, 2018, so it's been around for 4 years or something. This deck it's heavy, but it's brave. I think this deck is brave. So I've edged mine in black, and you'll see everything is still in order because I've only edged it. I've looked at the images, I've read the guidebook, but I haven't actually properly used it yet because I want to do some deeper study with it, like I said. This is a Thoth-inspired deck, but that is very rooted in modern day, and the choices of this deck are very brave. And this deck does not cut corner, and it does showcases the modern world in a way where there are going to be some triggering cards, so I want to put that out there. This is trigger warning for violence, drug abuse, disturbing kind of animal abuse, is that the word? So if you're sensitive to images that are going to be difficult to look at, violence or animal abuse, things like that, then just, you know, fast forward a little bit till I talk to the next deck, because this deck can be quite gut-wrenching. But this is why I bought it, because I didn't have any deck like this where it's showcasing the things that we don't normally want to see, at the same time as showcasing very beautiful, healing, light, hopeful images, such as this, you know, adjustment card here. So I find this deck incredibly interesting because of everything it depicts. As you can see, the major arcana is very rooted in modern life. We have some very interesting diversity here in terms of ethnicity, and each of the court cards will depict a different family that comes from a different ethnic background. Some of the cards are very hard-hitting, like this Devil card, for example, this Tower card, for example. But then some of the cards like this Sun and the Universe are very hopeful and beautiful. So this is something, you know, to be aware of. Because this is called a New Era element, you can see there's going to be strong element kind of inspiration throughout the deck. So we have fire, water, earth, and air. And again, this feels very rooted in modern day, but it is brave. The choices are bold. So it will showcase things, for example, such as this war card right here, or you'll have this person winning the race right here, which is great. Firefighters and, you know, race cars. One of my favorite things about this deck are actually the court card. Like I mentioned, each court card comes from a different ethnicity. So here we have the fire court cards, beautiful. And this deck not only shows, you know, ethnicity diversity, but it does a great job at showcasing age diversity as well, if it's something that's important to you. As you can see, not every card is traumatic. Like you can see, those you know, two cards are very beautiful, even this one. But then you have some more difficult ones. So just be aware. One that, you know, I find quite sad is this one, obviously. I mean, the Devil card is like pretty horrendous. This is one that I find very sad. We have, you know, a few other ones that are a bit more difficult. For the water card, we have these court cards, which are beautiful. I believe they are more Maori inspired, I think, or Polynesian. I'm not sure, I don't want to talk shit, but this is what it looks like. As I mentioned, there's some drug abuse references, so be aware if you use this deck for others, it could be triggering. You know, we have this with this Three of Swords here. We also have, obviously, you know, this cruelty card here with animal trial, which is not nice. So the air suit looks more Asian inspired, right there. And finally we have the earth suit, beautiful banyan tree right there. This is one of the worst card for me, this torment card. I find it very difficult to look at, but you know, I appreciate the fact that the choices are very bold, the choices are very impactful, and this is why I chose this particular deck and I bought it, because I feel like it depicts things that I need to face, and so this one doesn't sugarcoat. And another reason why I actually chose this particular deck, why I bought it, is that not only does it, you know, depict some harsh truths, but I feel like it's bold, it's brave, and definitely for my personal use, it will be very useful for me to do some introspective work, some shadow work, maybe some journaling, things like that, as well as helping me learn the thoughts. I think it's going to be a great one for going deep. I don't think I would use this deck for others because I wouldn't want to be triggering anyone. But for myself, you know, I'm taking responsibility for myself, and I feel like this is a good one for me to explore, to you know, kind of go beyond the surface. On top of that, the Father of Earth actually is like the identical copy of my grandfather. I'll show you a picture actually. My friends made me this tarot deck where they used a lot of my pictures and, you know, to create a bespoke kind of tarot deck for me as part of a present that they made me last year, which was amazing. And as you can see, this is me when I was a child with my grandfather who's passed. And you can't really see it, but this was the closest picture I had to show you. But you can see the hat that he was wearing, and he really looks like this. It's eerie, honestly. It's very spooky how accurate this is a depiction of my grandfather. And so of course, for sentimental reason, when I saw this, I was like, well, I have to have it now. So for me, this deck is gonna be very interesting. And again, I don't see many people talk about it, I guess because there are some confronting, difficult cards. I can see why some people wouldn't want to work for it. Fills a gap in my collection in terms of, you know, being a bit more direct, more blunt, and showcasing things that unfortunately are part of our reality. So it still has some beautiful cards as well. It's not just doom and gloom, you know. There are some very hopeful cards, like look at this Daughter of Cups here. She's stunning. Okay, we have 3 decks left. So the next underrated tarot deck I wanted to mention is the Uncommon Tarot by Shaheen Miro, and this is a recent-ish deck. I think it came out last year. As you can see, it comes in one of those little box like this. It has a nice little guidebook, and this deck is a collage style deck that is very rooted in modern life. So here are the backs, which unfortunately are the only thing I don't like about the decks, because the front is collage style and very bright, very bold. The backs feel like they don't go at all with the front, but you know, I can get past it. I'm not petty like that, and I love the deck so much that I kind of forget about the back, but I will just say that it just feels like 2 different worlds. It came pre-edged in silver. So what I really like about this deck is that it definitely inspires itself from modern day, but the collage style makes it kind of timeless. It's hard to explain, and I really appreciate this deck as well for the fact that it does include some diversity, especially ethnicity diversity, which is always welcome to see in a mass market deck. I like the fact that some of the more traditional cards that we see represented a certain way are switched. For example, this star card represents a male presenting figure. Normally we always see a female presenting figure. That's an interesting change. there is some same-sex couple in this particular deck, so it feels inclusive to an extent. You know, obviously, like, not every deck is perfect. This deck was actually created by a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, so this is always nice as well to support. Whenever I can, I try to support you know, queer creators. That's important to me. And overall, this deck is just beautiful. I love this deck so much, and it's such a great reader, and the collage is beautiful. I just love this deck, and I don't see enough people talk about it. It honestly feels like, particularly this one, out of all the ones I've shown you today, this is one I feel like one of the most that has gone through below the radar. Like, even when it came out last year, which is a shame. This is a brilliant deck. It really is. I would feel comfortable reading with this deck for anyone. I think even if you are new to tarot or intimidated by tarot, you could definitely read with this deck, because there is no, you know, it kind of veer away from the more occult kind of esoteric symbol, but still does it have a lot of symbolisms that are important. A lot of the cards are beautiful. It's a celebration of life. It's a celebration of everything that it is to be human. Look at this Nine of Swords. Like, I love this kind of like projection on the wall to represent our worries, our nightmares, etc. That's what they are. They're just projection. They're just things that we see through our prism. And I love this. You know, it makes me look at a card a different way. This Devil card is brilliant. She's very badass. I was gonna say a couple of the major arcana cards have been renamed. For example, instead of the Hierophant, we have the Wise One. But it's not, you know, it's easy to follow. Otherwise, it pretty much follows the RWS. And I just find this deck really nice. I think it's one of those decks that has gone under the radar and yet is beautiful. It's affordable. It is just great. It's a great deck. Okay, last two decks. So the next up is Tarot de la Nouvelle Vision. This is a French version of Tarot of the New Vision, I believe it's called in English. It's a Los Scarabeo deck, and it's part of the Los Scarabeo decks that are, yeah, Tarot of the New Vision it is in English. You know those Scarabeo decks we have in that same vein? We have the After Tarot, we have the Before Tarot, you know, tarot decks that kind of follow RWS, but they have, Los Scarabeo has asked artists to kind of imagine what would be around what Pixie has given us in terms of the traditional RWS painting. In this particular case, the Tarot of the New Vision, this is showing you the RWS if you were to look at the image from behind. So if you were to do a 180 turn from Pixie's traditional Rider-Waite-Smith artwork, this is what the artist imagined you would see. And so I've edged, these are the backs by the way, and I've edged mine in green. And I think this deck is underrated because it is brilliant. And again, I don't see that many people read with it, because I feel like a lot of people think those decks are gimmicks, like the After Tarot, the Before Tarot, this one, the In-Between Tarot, decks that are kind of based around showcasing what could be around Pixie's artwork, sometimes may feel gimmicky. I know I felt like that before I purchased this deck. I was like, I don't need that. That's just gonna be like, you know, feels like a one-off thing. I'm not really gonna get anything out of my readings. But I was so wrong. I was really wrong. So as you can see, this is the Three of Cups. Normally we would look at this from this side. Now we've turned 180 and we're seeing it from the other side. What makes this deck very interesting, and I think important especially if you're like trying to expand your tarot knowledge, it can completely change the way you look at a certain card. Of course, this isn't created by Pixie, so we don't know that's what she imagined on the other side of the card, but it still gives you another vision of this particular card. It definitely expanded my tarot knowledge and made me look at the card differently. Some of the cards are not going to be looking that different. For example, for this one, we just see this castle here. It doesn't really change the meaning of the card that much. For the devil, we now see them from the back, and we see that there are two other devils out there looking at the two beings right here. Some of them, though, behind the Emperor, we have this turtle, which I think is brilliant, because the Emperor is always linked to the eagle, to Aries sign, etc. But now we have the addition of a turtle hiding behind the Emperor's throne, and that gives you, for me, the idea of slowly but surely. If you want to build your empire, it's gonna take time, right? Rome wasn't built within a day. This is what makes me think of. And so for me, this is a reminder that whatever you're trying to build, whatever structure you're trying to construct and to create, you don't have to rush. Things will happen in their own timing. And so that definitely expands my understanding and meaning of the Emperor. And it does that for a lot of the cards. Some of the cards don't really make sense, like this particular Page of Swords. He's standing on a stone that looks like someone's head. What the fuck is going on there? I don't know. Do you know? I would love to know. But I think we can be okay with not knowing, and it still gives us something to ponder about, right? It's interesting. This one is another favorite, this Six of Pentacles. Normally we see this person from the front sharing their wealth with people who seem poorer than this person, you know, this is charity, etc., etc. Except this particular person has a hole in their clothes, and so maybe they're not as wealthy as we thought they were. Maybe they're pretending to be wealthy, maybe they're sharing despite the fact that they too have some financial issues. Maybe this is about being generous, maybe this is being about overly generous and needing to take care of yourself first. Or maybe it's about showcasing that you don't have to wait until you have made it before you can actually help others along the way. There is so much there to unpack, and I think this deck is brilliant for that, helping me look at what am I not seeing, what am I missing, what am I not seeing, because it makes me look at certain things from another perspective. If the Hanged Man was a deck, this would be this, except instead of turning things upside down, it gives it like on the other side. But overall, this is very underrated because I think you can have really great readings with this. And if you are trying to learn tarot a little bit deeper and you want a new perspective and you feel like you've seen it all and you feel a bit blasé about tarot and kind of like now you're plateauing in the sense and you feel like every single deck you're seeing is just a, you know, continuation of the RWS, like you're not getting any new insight about the card, get this one or the After Tarot or the Before Tarot because it will make you look at things differently. It definitely carries Tarot of the New Visions perfectly. Okay, we've made it to the last deck. Thank you so much, first of all, if you've made it to this point. If you have made it this far and ready to see the last deck, then comment a little seashell emoji, so I know you've made it this far. It will make my day seeing the little seashell because I really appreciate everyone who like sticks with me to the end. I know you have so much other things to be doing, and so I really appreciate if you take the time to, you know, welcome me into your life for a little bit. The last tarot deck I wanted to mention as my underrated tarot is the Gaian Tarot. This is a Llewellyn deck, and this is one of those books that are quite flimsy. I don't really like the box at all. As you can see, you have the cards that come here that I've had to put in a little bag because they were flying everywhere. And then on this side, you have actually a very substantial guidebook that is great. If you're trying to, again, if you're a beginner, this is a great little guidebook. Or even just beginner. I read all of my guidebooks, listen. I read the guidebooks. I am that person that reads all the guidebooks. Even if it's like a guidebook that looks quite small, as long as it's not just keywords, I will read the guidebook because I feel like I can always learn something new and I always want to know the artist's point of view. Enough about the box, who cares? We want to see the cards. So the Gyan Tarot. Now, I feel like I shouldn't call this particularly a underrated deck because I know this has its cult following, or at least had its cult following for, you know, a while. A few years back when this deck came out, a lot of people loved it, a lot of people used it, but for me, I just don't feel like I see that many people talk about it nowadays. Again, because there's probably been a ton of decks that have been out since, and so this one seems to have fallen a bit like under the rug. However, this is a really great deck, especially what makes this deck a power combo or a powerhouse, not power combo, powerhouse, is the facial expressions of the characters. The characters are so expressive. I don't have any deck that actually depicts emotions such as this one. Look at the Six of Cups. She looks so hopeful and dreamy, wishing upon the stars. It's so emotive. So this particular deck, at first I didn't want to buy because I found the faces a bit fugly. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't feel like the faces were very pretty. The faces weren't really, some of them, they just bothered, like they just didn't look that nice. Let's be real. I realized that I was being very shallow and that actually this is the very advantage of the deck. It's those fugly faces because it's what makes the deck so emotive. It's what makes the deck so special. That the fact that some of those characters have very emotive kind of faces, it's what makes this deck so interesting. So don't get put off if you see a couple of cards where you think, oh, I don't like that, I don't like this face. Let me try and find a couple of examples. It's just not necessarily the aesthetic we're used to see. Like, look at this Empress. She doesn't look like your stereotypical beauty that we see in all the other decks, and yet I now have totally fallen in love with her. Flawed in a way that she's relatable, and I really now appreciate those characters. The fact that they have, you know, not your stereotypical aesthetically perfect faces is now why I love this deck so much. For me, this deck is perfect if you're trying to do any kind of a relationship involved reading, not just like romantic, but in terms of friendship, etc., because the dynamic between the characters and their expression are really telling. This Eight of Swords is amazing. It's one of my favorite cards in the deck. It really depicts how oftentimes the Eight of Swords, you know, it's in our head. We have the power to change, to remove ourselves from this mental prison. It all stands with our projection, our prism, what we have created, the prison we've built ourselves, that we actually have the key to get out of. So this deck is brilliant. I feel very ashamed that I was shallow enough to at first write this deck off because I found some of the cards not very aesthetically pleasing, because now I'm actually really in love with this deck. I think it's a great deck, so I can totally see why it was so popular. Look at the Lovers. It's actually an older couple, and I love that. I love that it depicts like elderly love. This is a nice and welcome change again for the Lovers. Usually we see younger kind of love, and look, we have a dog here, which makes my heart melt, because this is unconditional love right there. I really find this deck very emotive, very expressive. Look at this Three of Cups. It's like, I love that. The abundance, the pumpkins, the cheese. This is a party I want to go to. Like, this is my kind of party. If there is cheese and wine, like, sign me up. I am here. So, my friends, we have made it to the end. Thank you so much if you stayed with me. If you are not yet subscribed, I invite you to join the tide and do so. I would love to have you, but of course, no pressure. And if you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you gave my video a thumbs up or leave me a comment. It does really help my channel to grow, and I'm really grateful for everyone who takes the time to do that. And leave me a comment down below. Let me know, what do you think are underrated tarot decks, kind of underdogs, the hidden gems that not that many people seem to talk about, but that you think are really great decks. And until my next video, as per usual, I am sending you so much good vibes. Take care of yourself and keep navigating the waves of your soul. Bye!